Hello and welcome. Today we've got Lloyd Brunson, and today we're going to be discussing the abolishment of the income tax. Very bold statements that President Trump has made. We're going to talk about the Constitution, Trump's potential vice president, all the teasers. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily news reels. Lloyd, thank you so much for joining me, sir. How are you, and what have you been up to?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's great to be here. Well, we've been working on a new campaign with new stuff that's going to be available. It's supposed to be done on Saturday, where people can actually sign their own personal petition for redress of grievances to Congress and to SCOTUS. And the last time America had an opportunity to actually participate in a petition for redress of grievances without going through the court system was in the 1800s to abolish slavery. So we're excited about that. That should be up and running. Hopefully it'll be up and running by the end of the week, where it's a preset letter. It has something to do with the Fed. We're going to expose the Federal Reserve in a way that even the members of Congress that are pushing to abolish the Fed haven't identified. And so we're excited about that. And
Tell me a
we're
little
going to
bit.
have another. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that so I can understand exactly what
Well,
it is.
there's a House bill. There's a House bill introduced by a couple of U.S. House representatives, I believe, from Kentucky, and they complain about the interest in inflation and stuff. But Tucker Carlson said it before he was fired. It's real simple. When $1 trillion is created out of thin air, that's supposed to be profit, not debt. We're borrowing our own money. And the Federal Reserve System is a nonprofit organization, and every $1 trillion they create, they're supposed to transfer to the Treasury as profit, not loan it to us. They're loaning our own money to us. They're violating their nonprofit status. As a matter of fact, quite a few years ago, I had a visit with a Democrat member of the U.S. House, Congressman Alan Grayson from Florida. And we talked about this, and it's like they need to be sued. The Federal Reserve is violating their nonprofit status. Well, what does that mean? It means that every $1 trillion they create, they're not supposed to bill us for it. It's our property. So they've tricked us into believing that we've got to borrow money into existence, and we don't. So the Federal Reserve, if we were to enforce their nonprofit status, and Stephen Moore, former chief economics advisor for Donald Trump in Las Vegas several years ago, agreed with me to simplify it. I said, if we could simply, in simple terms, if we could enforce the nonprofit status of the Federal Reserve System and get them to return all the embezzled money which they have embezzled, it would far exceed the federal debt, and it would eliminate the need for income tax completely.
Wow, that is music to my ears and music to the ears of the people watching today, because we've been talking about this for a very long time, for the last 4 years. You know, they say the conspiracy group, and the Google likes to call this the conspiracy stuff, but actually Donald Trump made a bold statement about about not paying income tax on your tips, and also even getting rid of the federal income tax. So,
Well, and
please.
yeah, and these members of Congress are on the right track. So abolishing the Fed, we need their assets that they have stolen from us, literally. I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult for people to realize it's not a conspiracy theory to realize that when $1 trillion is created out of thin air, we shouldn't be taxed for it. And we
No.
are. And so the amount of money not just money, but we're talking assets that could be recovered that they've stolen from us by claiming that the trillions they create is their property, the assets would actually turn into a huge windfall of tax refunds for Americans.
So you're saying that potentially American people, and I believe that when Donald Trump is successful at applying these new laws and policies, that this is going to be a ripple effect across the world, not just the United
Absolutely.
States eventually. And this is
Right. And
why.
I've talked to him about this too.
And what did he
You can see
say?
it on YouTube. You can see it on YouTube. I was in a group and I got to the microphone and I asked him a question about that. And he says, yeah, we need to have our money returned to us. So if you look up Lloyd Brunson, Donald Trump, Freedom Fest, I think you can find the video. I'll try to put the link on lloydbrunson.com or 7discoveries.com so people can see that. And also there's some other links where $9 trillion is missing from the Federal Reserve And it's pretty interesting because the Inspector General of the Federal Reserve is saying, don't worry about it. It's not part of the tax debt. Okay, $9 trillion in an 8 or 9 month period is created by the Federal Reserve System, wire transferred to foreign entities, and they're saying, don't worry about it because we didn't loan it to Congress, so you're not being billed for it.
Yeah.
$9 trillion can ruin this world, let alone this country. And we need to get to the bottom of this. And so I'm glad the members of the U.S. House are doing this. But I'll tell you, a lot of other members of the House and Senate ought to be all over this to get this thing happening and at least expose what these guys are doing. $1 trillion out of thin air is supposed to be profit for the Treasury, not tax debt burden for U.S. citizens having to return our own money to people that created out of thin air.
So what does that look like to you, Lloyd? I mean, would you say that the American people will receive rebates?
I think they could do it in a simple way. They could return to get it going. They could start with $100,000 refund for those who have paid into it at least $100,000. So that would be $100,000 refund, and then eliminate socialism, eliminate unconstitutional spending, and then we have a fantastic path to prosperity that we've never imagined before.
Now, obviously, they're printing money. It's not backed by gold or silver or any kind of resources. It's just backed by.
It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. They could back it. They could back it, but they could back U.S. dollars could be backed by a trillionth of an ounce of gold per dollar. Now, remember the stores like Sears. I remember Sears had a Sears dollar. They had all these dollars, and little fine print it would said redeemable in 1/10 of 1 penny. But the value, the commerce value of trading back and forth fluctuates. So government can't control the fluctuating value, but they can control the redeemable value. And a trillionth of an ounce of gold would be so slight that people could actually donate the gold to back the currency. And then everyone would understand that we have a gold-backed currency, if that's what we want, and we would have an incredible tax-free system. And then that money would be protected by no more socialism or unconstitutional spending. And then we could get the banks out of the money creation business. And that's what they're doing. The government should create money, and private industry, private people should have banks. So if they have property they want to collateralize, the government could loan the money to certain individuals so that they could go into the investment and banking business, but it needs to be separate. And a lot of people just don't realize that banking and money creation are supposed to be two separate entities, two separate operations, and government should be creating money and the private sector should be in the banking industry, and they should never mix.
Do you think that the bank should be, charging us a large amount of interest? Shouldn't it be a one-time
Well,
admin fee?
if you, we've got to figure this out. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but if we just start eliminating corruption and lowering taxes, we're on the right path. But we're going to have some really smart people figure out how to inject money into the economy. If you have property and you have land or property, and the government has special programs where they can loan you money at a low interest, then you can loan it and invest it any way you want to whoever you want. You could
Absolutely.
charge 1%, 10%, 30%. It could be an investment. Now we're putting banking into its proper private sector role, and we keep the money creation separate from bankers. Right now, the bankers own our currency. They're embezzling our currency, and they're going crazy with it. And so we need to eliminate that. So hopefully I can have a visit with some of these members of the U.S. House and give my input so we can see if we can help them understand a little bit more that they seem to be ignorant about, unless they're just not wanting to talk about it. But it's so simple. $1 trillion out of thin air is supposed to be profit for the Treasury, not tax debt.
So, do you believe that right now the monetary system, and it's they're printing money, it's backed by interest and inflation and debt. Do you believe that it's a fraud right now?
Well, the problem with the printing of money, it's in the wrong hands. If our government took back the power to create money, the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing prints money. Okay, the Federal Reserve System creates the digital money. I called the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and I says, who gets all the printed money? And this person said, There's one exclusive customer that we sell all printed money to. I guess blowing my mind. I kind of knew anyway, but it's like I couldn't believe I was actually hearing this from a live person on the phone. And I said, well, tell me about it. She says, are you a reporter? I says, no, not really at the time. And so she says, well, when money is printed, it's sold to one exclusive customer at cost of printing. Think about that. $100 bill, and the cost of printing for $100 bill is about 15 cents at the time. So, and they sell it to the Federal Reserve System, which is a private entity, privately owned.
Yeah. So
Think
it's a
about that.
fraud. Yeah.
So they get $100 bill for 15 cents. So the money that's printed is real money. We use it every day. That's how we survive. That's how you have equipment. You use that money, that paper money, to buy stuff with. So the problem is not that it's paper, or not that it's backed, although it could be backed, like I mentioned, with gold. But the problem is it's in the wrong hands. They've hijacked it. They've
Right.
stolen our money. So think about it. It's really incredible. The Federal Reserve has shown how money can work. I mean, look at the standard of living that we have. Even with the tax burden and inflation, everything else, we still have a monetary system that's working. It just needs to be cleaned up.
I mean, it only has value really because we actually give it value. But would you believe that?
Exactly.
Would you believe that right now, this system, the monetary system, the Federal Reserve, their activities and the way they're dealing with the creation of money and the value it has, it's a fraud?
Well, Abraham Lincoln had a big problem. He was out of money, and he had been borrowing from the banks at up to 30%, 37% interest. And Colonel Dick Taylor said to him, if you want to win this war, you better get with Congress and create your own money and stop borrowing it from the banks. The banks should not be creating money. They shouldn't be allowed to create money. And that's the problem today. The banks are creating money. We got to stop that. We
Right.
got to take the money creation powers. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gives the Congress the power to create money. People think our government's creating money and just printing it out like crazy. No, that's not true. The U.S. government doesn't own its own money. It's been stolen. It's been hijacked. We got to get it back. And once we get it back, then we can perfect it. So Colonel Dick Taylor said to Abraham Lincoln, create 450 million United States dollars with Congress. And President Lincoln says, well, how do we know that soldiers will accept it? He says they will accept it because it'll be legal tender backed by the United States government. It'll be on paper, and it'll have beautiful, colorful ink. And so they did that, and it worked. People accepted the money because it was United States currency. Now you hear about Bitcoin and all these digital currencies. They are not a currency unless the government sanctions it, period. The most important power Congress has is to create money, and they've lost control of it. They've lost the creative power of it. They've lost ownership of it, and we've got to get it back. Article 1, Section 8 gives the Congress the power to coin money, to create money, determine its value, determine how much gold or silver to back each note with for redemption, and then let the free market system determine its value in the form of trading back and forth with goods and services. Exchange of goods and services really determines the value, right? So that's what needs to
Absolutely.
be. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's clean up the system we have. Let's take it back. Refund at least $100,000 for everyone's income taxes that they paid. Get rid of taxation completely. Get rid of socialistic programs, get rid of the corruption, but exposing the Federal Reserve that $1 trillion out of thin air is supposed to be profit for the Treasury, not tax debt. Just exposing that, then let people dig in deeper and see what's going on, and we'll overturn these modern day corrupt money changers.
Absolutely. So would you say that the system is illegal? I'm trying to get you to say the word. Do you think it's illegal, this system, the monetary system that is?
It's been stolen from us.
Yeah.
The monetary system has been stolen by the private banking industry. We've got to get it back. Congress has that power, and they gave it up. Every member of Congress got to realize that they have the responsibility to protect our currency, and they've allowed it to be hijacked, stolen. So it's really what they've done is they've enabled the counterfeiters to counterfeit our currency, and then they've allowed it to be labeled and branded as U.S. currency. So
Absolutely.
Congress is to blame here too. Congress has the responsibility to protect us from what is happening. But guess what? The Federal Reserve System is like the source of financing for politicians. When politicians are financed by these global entities and these other corporations that are tied into the central banking system, they're literally owned by these people. And so I'm surprised that we have a couple of members of Congress that are willing to expose and attack this problem, because every single member of Congress has dirty money in his pockets, campaign money that has come from these counterfeiters. So we've got to get our money back. And that's what President Trump said when I asked him the question about Ron Paul was saying 1.6 trillion of the debt is fictitious and we shouldn't have to pay it back. And I says, we've got to do something about that. And in his answer, you can see it on YouTube, he says, yeah, we've got to get our money back. And when he said that, the whole audience cheered. There were about 4,000 people in the audience.
Look, I completely agree with you. It's to me, it's completely rigged. Now, my question to you is, if it's rigged and fictitious, which we both believe this, and the viewers, of course, believe this too, what are the chances if we're going to be successful at eliminating income tax, and we're going to make this world a better place? We're going to have large deportation, immigration deportation, which I think once it happens in America, again, like I said, it's going to be a ripple effect across the world, and we want to clean up this world. Now,
Oh, yeah.
what are the chances of once this monetary system has been proven to be fictitious, and we're going to do something about it? What happens to all the contracts, mortgages, personal loans, debt, credit card that have been taken out in this fictitious system? What are going to happen? Are they going to be null and void and written off completely?
Well, that's a very good question. That's where a lot of smart people would have to get together and try to figure this thing out. So refunds would help a lot. The first thing probably would happen was the interest would probably be eliminated. And then there would be a very intelligent, mechanized way to reduce and maybe altogether eliminate most of the debt that has taken place here in America, having to do with banks and the fractional banking industry and the Federal Reserve System stealing our money. So I talk about $100,000 refund. It could be much, much more than that. So we're talking about global entities, not just money that the Federal Reserve System people, say shareholders and other beneficiaries of the Federal Reserve System have. They have incredible amounts of equity in actual real assets, not just cash, but gold, silver, mines, global entities. And those need to be confiscated and then figured out how they are to be divided amongst the taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers, and then other countries could follow suit to overthrow the modern day money changers, basically. The Constitution was given to us by God, and it's a tax-free system. Remember the scriptures where, Jesus took a coin out of a fish's mouth? What happened was Jesus was watching Peter, and Peter was approached by a tax collector, and he said, "Does your master pay tribute, pay taxes?" And Peter says, "Oh yes, of course." And then Peter came into where the building was that Jesus was, and Jesus stopped him and reproved him and says, "What are you doing, telling them that I pay taxes?" And then he says, "Lest we offend them, go get a coin out of a fish's mouth and give that to them." The Constitution is a tax-free system. We do not need to be taxed one single penny for anything. If we understand Article 1, Section 8, and we understand what the Federal Reserve System is, how it has stolen our prosperity. They're so devious. They're so intelligent, though. They know how to enslave us just enough where
Yeah.
we're not enslaved as much as would cause a huge rebellion. But this thing with the House could change that. So people are going to wake up to it and go, wow, we've been ripped off big time for
So in
many years.
2024, we're hoping that Trump will win. He gets into office in January of 2025. How long, in your opinion, do you think from that moment onwards, how long after do you think we will see this happen?
Well, if that happens, I think it could be within weeks or maybe months. It depends on how fast America wakes up to it. But it's such a simplistic concept. I think it could put a hold on probably all debt for a while immediately. I think we could see some immediate things happen that would start the pushback against this nonsense.
And why do you think that he would do that then? And why not? Why hasn't he done that in the previous administration?
Well, the good people need to be awake. People have held the letter campaign, the Brunson letter campaign is still going. People are still sending in letters, and that helps. The Supreme Court, the Congress, President Trump needs public awareness, needs public support. The court of public opinion is the highest court, underneath God, right? And so when America wakes up, then the invisible hand, the invisible arm, just like free enterprise, things happen. Thomas Jefferson had it together. He said the true correction for constitutional abuse is education, exposure. I would say what he was saying was the true correction of constitutional abuse is awareness and exposure and seeing. It's like the Wizard of Oz, the curtain being pulled back. When people realize what Tucker was saying, that $1 trillion out of thin air, we shouldn't be paying that back. If it's given loan to Congress, it shouldn't be a loan. Congress should not be borrowing money from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is supposed to wire transfer it as profit, not as debt. Boy, have they pulled the wool over our eyes for so many years. And that's going to change. And once we see the truth will make us free, right? It's knowledge, it's information, and things will happen that we have no idea how they're going to happen. But there's power out there amongst the people that once they see the truth, things happen and changes take place.
Absolutely. Now, we've seen a lot of countries who, which we call the BRICS nations, who are very interested in abolishing and ditching the dollar and inheriting gold to back their currency, which would give them much more higher purchasing powers. What would happen to their currencies, especially with those currencies who are very, very weak, who've got currency manipulators applied onto those currencies by the Federal Reserve? What would happen to those currencies being now, eventually going to be backed by gold and ditching the dollar?
Well, I think it's a more simple than that, actually. We have a currency right now that's not backed by gold or silver. Can you imagine right now if we just eliminated corruption and enforced the nonprofit status of the Federal Reserve? What would we have with just that? We would have an amazing amount of inflation being eliminated. And actually, most of the inflation that's happening today isn't much to do with too much money in the economy. Smart economists will even say this. I've heard them talk on Fox News. It's about the production of oil and gas that has been limited, that's caused higher prices. Most of it has come from oil and gas, and the limitation of our production of goods and services have caused higher prices. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We might have an incredible system here if we just get rid of the corruption. And then if we want to back our gold and our money with a fraction of an ounce of gold, we could do that. But right now, think about it. Our economy is working and technology is working, even though we're not working nearly as well as we could on a system that could be taken over and cleaned up. If we just cleaned it up, sometimes the answer is so simple, it's hard for us to believe or accept it. But it could really be as simple as what Stephen Moore was saying when we had this conversation, as if in theory, if you enforce just simply right now, just enforced the nonprofit status of the Federal Reserve System, just did that, that would be unbelievable. That would reduce taxation, and reducing taxation gives people more power to buy goods and services. And then it could end up eliminating interest, and then it could put money back in the producers' pockets. We're not talking about money in parasites' pockets. We're talking about the producers having their property, their money returned to them. So in simple terms, enforce the nonprofit status of the Federal Reserve System and stop the corruption that keeps us from producing our own our products here, mainly oil and gas, and we're on the right track to a huge change in our economic system, and then our prosperity is going to go through the roof just with that.
Absolutely. I think the man that I think is going to be successful at accomplishing this is Donald Trump. And this is why it's so important for everybody to be paying attention this election, this November, and voting. What do you think is going to happen in respect to voting integrity, election integrity? What do you think, what is being spoken about right now that you believe that this is we're going to have a fair election?
Well, people are freaking out. I'm one of them. And it's like, will we have a fair election? I mean, people were saying this was the most honest election we ever had, the last presidential election, and it was wrought with fraud. Unbelievable. The 2000 Mules film should have been endorsed and promoted by Fox News, and they didn't. So that's the big question. Are we going to have a fair election? Well, there is a God, and there are some wonderful, righteous people on this planet, and their prayers are being heard and answered. And so I think we're going to see some negative stuff, but we're going to see some positive, miraculous things happen as well. It's a biblical time, and so it's hard to guess and say exactly what is going to happen. So we just have to be prayerful and do the right thing and prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
And who do you think Trump will choose as his vice president? I mean, what kind of teasers has he given us for you to, make any assumptions about who could be his vice president?
Oh, it's just a wild guess. It could be Carrie Lake, it could be who knows? Who knows?
Absolutely.
It's just hard to guess.
Well, Lloyd Brunson, it's been an absolute honor having you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Well, yeah, I'd like to invite people again to go to my website, sevendiscoveries.com, and get this Constitution book. I've just printed like 30,000. If there are groups out there that want a bunch of them, please send me an email, lloydbrunson@gmail.com, and we'll see what we can do to get you a bunch of books. But this is the first publication ever to show the power clauses that include the power clause that shows the clause that defines and condemns socialism. It shows that there's a clause in the Constitution that demands the Constitution only be interpreted in ways that protect our rights, our God-given rights. It's the only little pocket-sized book that does that. It has a complete Constitution in it. And so to go to sevendiscoveries.com, contact me, lloydbrunson@gmail.com, if you want a bunch of them for a group or whatever. And then the 10th through the 13th, I'll be in Las Vegas at Freedom Fest. I think it's Caesars Convention Center or something like that. But you can go to Freedom Fest 2024. I'll be there from the 10th to the 13th hanging out. So I'll have a booth or a table there. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for your support. Thanks for what you're doing, Nicholas. And thank all of you guys for supporting this great cause of Constitution.
Thank you. And it's been an absolute honor. We'll speak again very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nicholas.